Hey guys, I'm Joseph and he's Nick, and you're in the Combat Zone live.
Where the enemy only has three things to say: bail out, abandon ship, and take cover. By the way, the phone number if you want to join us in our conversation tonight is 844-415-2115. And as, of course, we have a full list of topics to discuss. Joseph has some of them. I have some of them. And it's going to be an interesting show. It's good to get. It feels like it's getting back in the saddle again. So that's great.
Yeah, except that all of my calluses on my back end have disappeared. So it's going to take a little while to get.
That's a mental image I didn't need, Joseph. Thanks.
I know. Okay, so let's just talk for a minute or two, Nick, about what we're trying to do here with this show. We've had a number of shorter podcasts that we've done more or less live to tape with very little editing and that. But we really wanted to engage, I think, the broader audience out there on Facebook and by phone and various platforms. So let's just talk a little bit about what we're trying to do here.
Well, basically, my take on this is to discuss the issues of the day with from a conservative point of view in a way that you're not getting anywhere else, because the mainstream media is really good at covering it from a center-left point of view. So what we're trying to do is to give people the other side of the story, that they're not going to hear from the CBCs of the world or the Globe and Mails or terrestrial radio, the vast majority of which are center-left in the best of cases. Some of them are so far left it's almost impossible to read. So we have decided that we're just going to go out there and do our best and and engage in these topics and invite you to join us. Like I said, the number is 844-415-2115. So that's kind of my perspective on this. And, of course, we're going to be talking about, mixed in with all this, what it is to be a real conservative. What does that term mean? And then we'll blend that in. At least that's what I intend to do with it.
Okay. Well, I intend to be just about the same way, Nick.
I kind of thought that might be the story.
Yeah, a little bit of joking around, a little bit of fun, a little bit of entertainment, but also we're trying to be a little bit serious here as well, talking about the current events, politics, etc. So, but you're all going to have to bear with us a little bit because we're just finding our sea legs here. We've set up a lot of equipment, and I don't know that it's all working very effectively right now. So we're just bear with us as we move along, and we're going to iron out the snags and go on from there. Yeah,
there's I guess one of the first things while we're looking into some of those things, one of the things that has always driven people crazy is this whole idea about gas prices. If you wanted to just dive right into the topics, we have Doug Ford out there saying he's going to cut the price of fuel by 10 cents a liter. Now, for those of you old enough, and if you're 50 or over, you remember the good old imperial days. Now, my father told me when back in 1970, I think it was 78 when we changed over, he said one of the real reasons we did this was just because Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who was our prime minister at the time, wanted to flip the bird to the Americans. They were our biggest trading partner. There was no logical reason to change from the system we already had. It was working fine. It was very close to their system, and yet it cost industry millions of dollars to make the changes over to a double method of unit measurement, because even today you still can find things that you buy in both imperial and metric. Sorry? You mean like what? Well, tires is an example. 17-inch tires, 16-inch tires, and yet we're supposed to be metric. When you go to a golf course, how far is the first hole? 250, 300 yards. I mean, there's all kinds. And in grocery stores, you can find stuff by the pound. You can find stuff by the kilogram or whatever the heck the metric version is. All kinds of different things and applications. What we really did was took a system that was working just fine, and we made a dog's breakfast out of it by throwing in this in the top. Now, how does that all come back to Doug Ford cutting the price of gas? Because what happened is, as time goes by, you realize that if again, going back to those who are old enough to remember, Joe Clark was once our prime minister. He was decided that as the conservative prime minister, he was going to raise the price of gasoline 18 cents overnight.
A gallon.
Yeah.
It was 18 cents a gallon, I remember.
That's right. And Trudeau just tore him to pieces. We can't afford that. You'll drive business up, blah, 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 blah. So when Trudeau took over, we changed the metric, and he raised the price of gasoline 18 cents. But he did it incrementally. He didn't do it overnight. So the mistake that Clark made was trying to do it all in one go, even though there was no real reason or compelling reason other than government coffers to make those kinds of changes. So Doug has said, I'm going to cut the price of gas tax. I'm going to cut the gas tax to the point where we're taking 10 cents off a liter. Now, I won't get down in the weeds about, this tax and that tax and how it all works. But if you stop and think about it, right now at $1.25, gas is somewhere between $5 and $6 a gallon.
I think that's really where I would start this whole discussion because, we can tinker around a little bit with taxes and shave off 5 cents and 10 cents a liter here and there. And right now in Ontario, at least in the Ottawa area, when I go out to fill up with gas in the last few weeks, the price of gas has been hovering in the $1.30 to $1.35 per liter range. And that doesn't sound like a lot. I mean, it's a lot, but for those of us who are 50 years old and older who think in terms of gallons, I think it's important to take a step back and realize that that's in the $6 per gallon range.
Yeah.
$6 per gallon. Now, in contrast to this, if I drive an hour south of here into Ogdensburg in northern New York State, I could buy gas there for $2.75 a gallon.
Now that's U.S., but call
it
$3.
Yeah, no question about it. A U.S. gallon is a little bit smaller than an imperial gallon.
Yeah.
So you're getting less gas, but still,
it's costing a lot less money.
Call it $3 a gallon. Call it $3.25 a gallon. We're paying pretty much twice as much in Canada for gas, for our cars, for fuel, than they are in the United States. And I think that's quite outrageous, particularly because so much of it is tax. We're not actually paying for the fuel. Yes, we're paying for the fuel, but the reason the price is so high is because the tax is on it. There's a federal excise tax, and then there's a provincial excise tax. And those are flat rate taxes. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but it's X number of cents per liter for both of those. So they're both added on. They don't have a relationship to one another. But what's really outrageous, Nick, is the fact that we pay 13% in Ontario HST, which is the 5% GST, the federal sales tax, plus the 8% provincial portion of sales tax. So 13% that we're paying on top of not just the price of the fuel, but we're actually paying a tax on top of both of those excise taxes.
Right.
Now, there's something, I think, fundamentally wrong with a government charging a tax on a tax.
Yeah, it's unconstitutional. That's the number one reason that it shouldn't happen, is because if the government respects the Constitution, they should never pass a law like that. You cannot put a tax on a tax. And that's the kind of thing that's driving people crazy, is that, when you look at it, and a lot of people just grumble about it. Like, let me give you a small example. In my hometown, and where I live in Killaloe, they charge us $2 per bag to take our garbage to the dump. And I remember talking to one of the town councilors, a gentleman by the name of Stanley. And I said, Stanley, you can't do this. This is unconstitutional because we're already paying for garbage removal in our municipal taxes. How can you now add an extra tax on top of that? He said, well, the way we saw it, we were going to save people money. It was more money this way than if we actually had to raise car taxes. I said, that's not the point. You do not have the authority to do that. The Constitution makes that very clear. So we're still paying the $2 a bag. And it's just one of those little irritants that when when you have something that that is so obviously wrong, people get upset, and there's all kinds of reasons to get upset. But doggone it, that's part of what we have to work with. And you cannot throw the rule of law out just because you think you can do a better job without having to obey the Constitution. It's just not a good enough reason.
Well, constitutional or not, I just don't think it's fundamentally right in a moral sense to charge a tax on a tax.
You're right. Yeah, absolutely.
And in any event, the price of gas is much too high because of the taxes that we're paying.
Well, the other thing, and I would like to have somebody answer this question for me, how did we ever sign NAFTA in the first place and not get a break on the cost of fuel? We're a net producer. When we signed this deal, if my memory serves me correctly, and that's all I have to draw on right now, is had about 25 million people in Canada. Now, obviously, not all of them drive. So that number, let's cut that number in half. So that's what, 12.5 million people who are licensed to drive. I'm just trying to get a rough. Let's say there were 8 million cars on the road. Even at 20 or 22 miles to the gallon, that's a drop in the bucket compared to what goes south of the border and consumed every day in the United States, even at that time. So how do we end up with a deal where we don't benefit from our own resources by having cheap and affordable energy prices on gasoline?
But that's the point I'm making, Nick, or at least one of the points I'm making, is that the price that we're paying for fuel in Canada is so much of it is not actually the cost of the fuel. It's actually the cost. It's the taxes. It's like going to the, go to the liquor store and buy, whatever you want, a bottle of wine, beer, or something harder, a bottle of vodka, a bottle of scotch, a bottle of bourbon. Okay? The taxes on these things are outrageously high.
Well, 50% of the price of booze is tax.
And so I guess what's bothering me is that, okay, so we pay all of this tax. And, I know you're like me. We don't like to pay too much tax. We'd like to pay as little as possible, but we pay our fair share. We understand that we live in a community. People have to support the community.
Well, we're not against paying taxes altogether.
But why are we paying such high taxes? And to add insult to injury, we still can't balance the budget.
Don't look. Okay, the budget is something that, you know what it is? It's not that we can't. And when I'm talking about I'm talking about politicians. It's not that different political parties can't. They just have no desire to. It's easier to give people benefits out of the public purse than it is say, no, we can't afford it. It's like a parent that never says yes, that can't say no to a child in a grocery store when they want candy. I mean, gimme, 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 gimme. Well, to shut the child up, they give them some, even though they can't afford it. So as time goes by, they accrue debt. I'm making a very simplistic example here, but the government treats us like children, and we respond like children because we don't understand, and this is the collective we, that when you ask the government for something, you're really just asking yourself, because where does the government get the money to be able to give you all these benefits and goodies that you want? It's out of your own pocket or the pocket of your neighbor, and that's the part that makes me crazy.
Well, a lot of things make me crazy, Nick, I got to tell you. And so I'm just looking at a note. Nick handed me a note saying that our Facebook live stream is not working for some reason. That is very odd. So if people are out there on Facebook, I guess they can't hear me right now till we get that fixed.
Yeah, Facebook, and we have to get, I'm going to bring up Facebook here in a moment. We've got another few minutes before we hit a break, unless you want to take one now and we can...
No, let's just go on for a few minutes.
Okay. This time I'll let you pick the topic.
Well, while we're on the subject of provincial politics, the latest polling shows that the NDP, that's the New Democratic Party, for those of you who are not aware of politics in Canada, and that would be more or less Canada's Socialist Party. In Ontario, the NDP is sitting now at somewhere around 35%. The Progressive Conservatives, who were way in the lead, are down to 40% in the polls. And I'm wondering, am I the only person that thinks that might spell trouble for the Conservatives, that the NDP are gaining some sort of momentum? There's talk now about people on the left, who left-wing voters, liberal voters, progressive voters, voting strategically in order to block a conservative victory to prevent Doug Ford from becoming the premier.
The part I don't understand is, if you're not happy with Kathleen Wynne, if you're a liberal and you're not happy with Kathleen Wynne and her performance, all you're doing is changing the color of the horse between the traces. You're not getting anything different. Andrea Horwath and Kathleen Wynne have the same philosophical outlook when it comes to governance. One is just going to spend more. I know it's hard to believe, but Horwath and the NDP would spend even more than Kathleen Wynne does. And I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure that out. So voting strategically is actually voting, in this case, is voting against your own best interest. And how people can come to those conclusions, I have no idea.
Well, they just don't like Kathleen Wynne. And she's, I guess people just find her to be, I don't know, unlikable.
So why would they want another one?
Well, that's not the point, because Andrea Horwath, as a person, I think is on a different level or in a different category than Kathleen Wynne.
Well, that doesn't take much.
She presents better, I find. She doesn't look beaten up. I think Kathleen Wynne, to a degree, looks beaten up, a little older, a little tired, and she just grates people the wrong way. Andrea Horwath does not. Plus, she's not as well known as Kathleen Wynne. So this is what happens. And, you and I have talked about this before, Nick, where you'll get political parties that all rush to the center to a certain degree. And there's very little actual substantive difference, policy difference between the platforms of the political parties. In this election, there is. The conservative platform is very different from the NDP platform or the liberal platform, but quite often it's not. And when the political parties, their platforms are so similar, the only thing that people get to vote on really is personality. So they look at the leaders of these parties and they go, I like this person. I like the way they look. I like the way they talk. I like the way they dress. And that's what guides people's votes. And I think that you're going to see some of that playing out. You're absolutely right. The NDP, the platform of the NDP, they're proposing all kinds of things, not just free pharmacare, free dental care. The NDP, I don't know if the NDP is promising free tuition for university students, but certainly the Liberals have promised that.
If they don't do it now, they will.
So our problem in Ontario is that the policies that we've been following have led us into a terrible financial situation that I just not sure that the majority of people really, really appreciate. And that's where the danger lies in an NDP government coming to power, I think, as opposed to a Liberal government, is that not only will you not see a change in fiscal policy, but you'll see probably an acceleration of the spending, and more businesses are going to leave the province because of the high energy costs, high taxes, etc. The revenues are going to go down, the deficit is going to go up, and we're just going to keep on digging this hole deeper and deeper and deeper. So, my advice is if you don't like Kathleen Wynne because you think she's been running the province into the ground, for pity's sake, don't jump from the Liberals to the NDP, because the NDP is just going to give you more of the same. Yeah,
you're actually making it worse. You're ultimately going from the frying pan into the fire. So, because what has to happen when you have a situation like this is a complete course reversal, because if you don't, you're going to go over that cliff. Even a slight change in course, if you're headed for a cliff, isn't going to save you. It'll just take you a little longer to get to the edge of the cliff.
Right.
So this kind of stuff, I just have never understood. I've never gotten it because I like to approach things in a very simple way and boil things down to their essence. So when Kathleen Wynne talks about pharmacare for the elderly, and she's only just started using that language, by the way, about the elderly. Before that, pharmacare was just for people who were 25 and under, the bulk of them never have a prescription because they're young and they're healthy and they're fit. They don't need them. So you can promise them anything you want to because you know you'll never have to actually pay for it. And for years, the NDP have been in the same boat. They can make these wild promises. They can make these, we'll give you the moon, because for the vast majority of their existence, they never stood a chance of actually having to deliver it. Well, they've been saying it so long that they've begun to believe it, so that when they step into the reins of power, we have another Bob Rae on steroids. And this is the part that just makes me crazy. Now, there's a story in the press today that I think may help swing those numbers that you're talking about. It's about Doug Ford. The way I posted on Facebook was he must have been smiling all morning. And I'm talking about the Hydro One situation where their part-time board voted them like a $25,000 raise. And do I have the story pulled up? I think I might. Let me see if I can give you the numbers.
So Nick,
here it is.
Is our Facebook Live now working?
No.
It's not working?
No, it's not.
Okay.
So when we get to the bottom of the hour, we got to fix that. So we'll do it, unless you want to take that break now. All right, let me read you these numbers. Here's the Toronto Star says her main rivals for the Premier's job. So Tuesday, the $25,000 boost to part-time directors will earn $185,000, who will earn $185,000 a year, and $70,000 increase to $330,000 for the chair. Show the company owned 47% by the province is out of control. In other words, we own 47% of it. They have just given themselves massive raises for part-time work. They made $89 million in profit. And this is supposed to be we're supposed to be trying to bring the price of hydro down. What kind of optics is that? So when Doug Ford has that drop on his plate this morning at breakfast, or yesterday at breakfast, whenever this came out, he must have been just grinning. That's tailor-made. That's right up his alley. And he's going to milk that thing for everything it's worth.
I know. But, I have to tell you that the hydro problem in this province and the cost of hydro in this province is a very big problem. It's an extremely complicated problem. And I worry about making promises that are going to be very hard to keep. It's a badly tangled mess of contracts upon contracts and commitments and that kind of thing. And it's going to be a very difficult file to sort out.
No question. I couldn't agree with you more. But sorted out, it must get.
But of course, the question is, with a board earning that kind of money, why aren't they sorting this stuff out already? Like, why is hydro is for all intents and purposes in Ontario, it's now privatized.
Yes.
It's largely privatized.
Yeah.
And I'm a very big believer in private sector running things that government can't or shouldn't be running. I'm not against government running things. I'm not a libertarian. I'm a conservative. I think there's a role for government in doing certain things.
Right.
I have to confess to you, Nick, when it comes to hydro, I am sitting on the fence with respect to whether it should be private or publicly owned. But it should be one or the other. It shouldn't be this hybrid system where, it's run privately, but
managed provincially.
Taxpayers own, like you said, 47% of it. The whole thing is just a dog's breakfast, and somebody's going to have to get in there, and there's going to be nothing subtle about it. They're going to have to take a flamethrower and a sledgehammer to the whole structure, knock it down, and rebuild it. And it's going to be tough on people. I don't know what the result is going to be in terms of pricing. It's very hard for me to see that prices are going to come down very quickly. But where it's really going to be tough on people is that, there are a number of commitments and contracts that are very detrimental to the interests of the people of Ontario, very detrimental, I think, to the smooth operation of hydro across the province that we've entered into as a result of the government's green energy initiatives. And it's going to be very hard to extricate ourselves from that. And there's going to be costs involved in it. Not just financial costs, but costs to our reputation as well. But I just don't see any way out of it. I don't see any way out of just taking everything up, throwing it all into the hopper, lighting a match and tossing a match on it, and then starting from scratch.
Well, I think as far as our reputation as a place to do business with, that damage is already well and truly done by this present government. I mean, look, if I'm Joe's Wind Power and they come to me and say, look, 43 cents a kilowatt hour, and, it doesn't matter whether your turbine turns or not, we're going to pay you that, which is the way some of these deals are structured. Would I sign that? You're darn right I would. Of course I would, but I'm not dumb enough to know that these executives who run these large companies have got to know that gravy train is going to come to an end, that no government can afford that over the long haul. So for that reason, I think they knew they were signing bad deals when they signed them, but they also knew they could make a ton of money in the shorter term and walk away from this when it's all done and say thank you very much. So I don't know. I'm not worried too much about the damage to our reputation. I think that's already been accomplished. As far as what to do about it, I think you're right. It's flamethrower bulldozer time, because how else do you fix this? Now, I don't know whether this makes any sense or not, but I remember my grandfather. He was a linesman after he came home from World War II and got a job with the Leamington Public Utilities Commission. All right, and it was local, and they looked after their own grid, and that's what his job was, a linesman. He would go around, check lines, and he spent a lot of years climbing poles. So what's wrong with going back to that model? Let municipalities run their own little or hydro ones and just use the major producers of power, like Bruce Power as an example, or Niagara Falls, or all kinds of other places, to generate the power that we put into the grid. What's wrong with going back to that system? It worked really well in the past, and you eliminate a lot of upper level management, over managing systems, and you're taking a monolith, breaking it up into little pieces, and letting those little pieces do what they do best. There we go.
Hey, welcome back. It's Joseph, and he's Nick, and you're in the combat zone. And we hope you took a little bit of a break there. We did, and we were working on some technical difficulties. And to be perfectly honest with you guys, I'm just going to say this. I don't know if you can hear this on Facebook Live, but our Facebook Live stream seems to be working fine, at least on our end. But I'm not really sure that it's getting through there, Nick. But you posted on Facebook that people could listen to the show live at thecombatzone.ca. So
yeah, that's right.
Hopefully people will go there.
And when you get there, you have to click on the Listen Live button.
Yeah, click on Listen Live. It'll take you to the page, and there's a player there. And make sure you hit the arrow if it doesn't come on. And if you hear a short advertisement, for 20 seconds or whatever, telling you all about how you can listen to the Combat Zone live on Wednesdays from 9 till 11, that plays all the time when you first click on it. So there you go. Our number to call, by the way, if you want to join in the conversation, is toll-free, 844-415-2115. That number again is 844-415-2155, and that's anywhere in North America.
All right. Well, by the way, if let me know on Facebook, because I have my Facebook page open as well, and I just posted, if you're having a problem with Facebook Live, go to thecombatzone.ca. Let me know. Send me you can make a comment there on my Facebook page. You can use private messenger if you want. Just let me know if you can hear this. We're trying to get a sense of how well this is working. So you can contact me directly. That way I'm watching my Facebook page as we speak. Okay.
I just want to make one other comment.
Sure.
That if you're catching this in the combat zone, and you look at the player, you'll see that there are icons there. You can share the icon, or you could share the podcast with people, the live broadcast. You can let them know what's happening. Right. You can also chat. There's a chat function there, and I'm sitting here looking at the chat room as well. So if you feel like you don't want to be on the air, although, who doesn't want to have their 15 seconds of fame being on the air with us, Nick?
It would raise the IQ in this room by about 40%.
And you don't even have to be here in person to do it.
That's right.
Yeah, Nick's a very humble guy. I'm not.
No, that's why we make such a great team.
Nick, let's talk a little bit, Nick, about that's Nick coughing in the background.
Yes.
Yeah. He's had a bit of a cold and a little bit of allergies. I've been suffering from allergies terribly this spring already, which is funny because it's only been spring here in Ottawa for the last, I don't know,
2 days,
3 days, 2 days or something like that. It was an awful spring, cold. It's only I think the last snowfall we had here in Ottawa was only a couple of weeks ago. Did you, by the way, here's a bit of trivia. Did you know that Ottawa is the second coldest capital city in the world?
I thought it was the coldest.
No. The coldest is, are you ready? Let's wait. Let's put that question out there. What is the coldest city in the world? If anyone knows, send us a message by chat or post something on Facebook or give us a call. 844-415-2155 is our toll-free number. The coldest city in the world after Ottawa. Ottawa's the second coldest.
Obviously, you know the answer.
I actually do. I was going to blurt it out, and then I thought, oh, well, why not just put the question out there and
we'll see
if anyone else knows.
We'll see what happens.
Let's spend a few minutes talking foreign affairs.
Okay, let's do that.
So this week, okay, how can you go a week without talking about Donald Trump?
I don't know that you can.
Only good things, I have to say, though. You know, I'm quite shocked. Somebody coined a phrase called Bush derangement syndrome, and that was intended to describe how people reacted to George W. Bush.
Right.
Their irrational hatred, loathing of the man. Not just they didn't like his policies, they didn't like him.
Oh, yeah,
they couldn't stand him.
It was personal.
And so somebody came up with this, and you know, I don't think it's ever been an actual diagnosable illness, but I know that people suffered from it for sure, including people I know. You know, not so much friends, because you know people who would suffer from Bush derangement syndrome
aren't the kind of people you want to hang around.
Well, they probably wouldn't want to hang around with me anyway.
Oh,
although, you know, in fairness, I was not a George W. Bush cheerleader. There were a number of things that I questioned his wisdom on pursuing. But, you know, he's the elected president of the United States. That's fine. So there it is. But the point I was making here, Nick, is that whatever was Bush derangement syndrome, however bad that was, surely to goodness, Trump derangement syndrome is 10 times worse. I mean, my wife says, "Oh, it's never been this bad," and I go, "Well, you know, in the Americans fought, you know, a civil war, so I'm not really prepared to say that it's never been this bad." And of course, if you know anything about the history of when George Washington was the president and the infighting between the two emerging parties at the time, and the Jeffersonians and the Whigs and the Hamiltons and the Federalists, etc. It was pretty bad. The skullduggery, the name calling, the invective in the press, and this was back when, you know, political parties and political actors actually owned their own press, right? Their own newspapers and that. So it was pretty bad. So I'm not going to say it's the worst it's ever been in the United States, but what I will say is that it's the worst. Certainly, it's the worst I've ever seen it.
Yes,
and you know, I'm going back to, you know, the days of Watergate and Nixon as well. I was young, but I have vivid recollections of all of the shenanigans were going on around then, and how much the press and the left hated Nixon, which is funny because he wasn't actually that bad, you know, as a person. I don't know. Maybe he had his issues, but
when you look at Rob Ford as a Canadian example, Rob Ford definitely had his demons.
Oh, he definitely had his demons.
Absolutely. But it was so personal, especially for places like the Toronto Star. I hold them somewhat accountable for his early demise. They hounded him into the grave. They wouldn't give him a break. And now, when I mean give him a break, it's not that I thought they should start writing nice stuff about him, but he had people outside his house standing on a cinder block taking pictures of him and his family over the fence. You know, like, that's the kind of break I'm talking about. Like, when he's not at the office, leave him the hell alone. And they didn't do that. And they kept after him because it's personal. See, the one big difference I see between those people who call themselves socialists / communists / any leftist you want, for them it is absolutely a personal thing. Conservatives, on the other hand, or at least the kind of conservative that I like to think I am, which is more of a classic liberal than a conservative. Small. I believe in the vast majority of things conservatives stand for today, but I'm a little bit further to the right than I think a lot of people. But anyway, the point is that for us, we debate the politics, but we don't get down in it. Up until recently, we don't normally get down in the mud personally, because we knew the difference between what was acceptable when in political debate, and that range is pretty wide. But when you packed your briefcase up at the end of the day, you snapped it shut and you walked out and you got in your car and drove home, that was it. It ends there. Your family was always left alone. That's been blown out of the water under Trump. I mean, not that Trump's doing it, but this is what they're doing. They're going after him, and they're digging through old tweets. And it's just ridiculous how personal they take this.
Yeah, it's become a bit of an entertainment industry. And I thought that was the way it was with Rob Ford as well, to a degree. It was that, Rob Ford's antics sold newspapers. People were interested. They paid attention. He was, to say the least, an interesting character.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
And so is Donald Trump. But what's getting under my skin, and Nick, I'm not the world's biggest Donald Trump fan. His style does grate against me.
Me too.
And I wish there were a lot of things that he did and said that he'd do and say differently. But that aside, when you're talking about running the most powerful country in the world, there's a whole range, running any country for that matter, there's a whole range of things that have nothing to do with how you tweet and the language you use and how you conduct yourself and you deport yourself, etc. And what I feel is that you have to look beyond all of that stuff, as you had to look beyond a lot of that stuff with Rob Ford. And Donald Trump is not getting a fair shake. It's not just that people are hounding him. It's that nobody seems to be paying attention to the good things that he's doing. And there are a number of good things that he's doing. And we started this, I was going to say, we should talk a little bit about foreign policy. That's how we got on the Donald
topic.
Trump syndrome, okay?
Right.
But, look at what he's doing on foreign policy. The two, I think, biggest issues right now, files that he's been dealing with, North Korea and Iran. And to a lesser degree, generally speaking, the situation in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And the non-peace process, or the non-process peace process between
If there's
Israelis
a more
and...
worn-out term on the world stage, it's the peace process in regards with Palestine and Israel.
So I think that the decision of Donald Trump to move America's embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem was a stroke of genius. And, full disclosure, obviously, I'm partisan. I'm pro-Israel. So I would take their side anyway. But setting my partisanship aside, I think it was a stroke of genius because he laid down a marker. He said to primarily the Palestinians, and virtually anyone else that's interested in this file, but primarily the Palestinians, you are not going to hold us hostage anymore. You are not going to hold the peace process hostage anymore. You're not going to be able to say the world has to genuflect before the Palestinian leadership, or there's going to be violence, or the peace process isn't going to go forward anymore. And of course, this is now the leader of the Palestinians, Mahmoud Abbas. This is what he's saying now: is I will reject anything in terms of peace proposals that come from the United States because they can't be an honest broker. Oh, there's a term I hate: honest broker.
Yeah, no kidding.
There's too much being a broker in that term and not enough honesty. If you want to be an honest broker, you have to be honest, which means that sometimes you have to say to the parties, if one of them is being unreasonable, you have to say, you know what? I think you're being unreasonable. Stop it.
Well, I think that there was a meme or a meme or whatever they're called on the net that I saw the other day about this very issue. And I don't put a lot of stock in memes because they're very shallow. It's just somebody trying to be clever. But this one I think really hit the nail on the head. If the Palestinians wanted peace, they could have it tomorrow. If the Israelis wanted war, the Palestinians would cease to exist tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a way of looking at it. Look, let's many of my friends that are listening to this are going to go, they're going to roll their eyes and they go, "There's Ben-Ami again. He's on his soapbox." Look, let's not kid ourselves. It's going to be very hard for Israelis to make peace too. Not everybody in Israel wants to make the kinds of difficult concessions that probably will have to be made in order to find some sort of a compromise solution that satisfies the most people. That's going to be a very difficult thing for the Israelis as well. But for heaven's sakes, I mean, the Palestinians for decades now have just been making it easy on the Israelis because there is no partner for the Israelis on the Palestinian side for peace. There just isn't. And so they don't actually have to actually do anything. And I'm saying that with a grain of salt. Of course, they've done things, okay?
Right.
And in the final analysis, the Israelis will probably be able to make those concessions. But it'll be very painful, and, nobody should be under any illusions about how difficult it will be, and the fact that there are a lot of people in Israel who are just shrugging their shoulders and going, forget it, we're not interested anymore.
Yeah, and this is probably one of the great leftover legacies of the 20th century, is this ongoing problem. Now, there's a lot of people out there who say it doesn't matter what you offer Hamas and Abbas, the head of the Palestinian Authority. They only have one interest, and that is the destruction of Israel. And it doesn't matter what you bring to the table; they're never going to be satisfied.
But they have to know they're never going to destroy Israel. Which begs the question: really, what is this really that they want to destroy Israel, or is it that they just can't pull the trigger, figuratively speaking, on making the decisions, the difficult concessions that are necessary in order to make peace? I mean, there's something deeply psychological, I feel, going on here.
Oh, yeah, look, I agree with you. I'm no expert in Middle East, in Palestinian and Israeli affairs, but there is, to me, it looks like, and Iran has the same problem, the sense of manifest destiny. It doesn't matter if you succeed, it only matters if you try. And that's a very dangerous foreign policy. This is why, moving on in world affairs, if you want to jump to Iran with Trump and what he's doing with Iran, all of a sudden now you're seeing different moves on the chessboard than you otherwise would have seen under Obama. The canceling of the accord, the nuclear deal. There was nothing in that deal that guaranteed anybody's safety, because all he said was, I'm not, in essence, and I'm boiling it down, there's lots of threads you could follow, but they didn't put a ban on ballistic missile testing. They didn't put a ban on chemical weapons, as an example, or nerve agents. It was only nuclear. So if you're the mullahs in Iran and you want to lash out at a country, be it Israel or any other, you don't have to have a nuclear weapon to cause terror. You can just fill the nose cone full of sarin gas and fire it at the city of your choice, and that'll cause thousands of casualties.
Well, you're making a very fair point, and that, I think, was the fatal flaw of the agreement in the first place, or the so-called agreement, was that it was all about the nuclear ambitions of Iran. But here's the thing, even on that point, there was never an agreement that Iran would dismantle its nuclear weapons program.
Yeah.
All it did was delay it. In other words, the agreement was, we're going to lift all of these sanctions in return for you hitting the pause button for a number of years.
I think it was 8.
And once that time has run out, then we have to go back to the drawing board and renegotiate the deal anyway. If in fact that's what everybody wanted to do. Really, because the deal had a termination date, it was going to expire. Really, when you think about it, okay, what Trump did by taking the Americans out of the deal is he just sped up what was inevitably going to happen anyway.
Right. And
because the deal was going to expire anyway. Why not take it out now? Why not kill it now and renegotiate instead of waiting 5 or 8 or 10 years or whatever the amount of time before you actually sit at the table.
He's not interested in taking Obama's tactic of booting him down the road for somebody else to deal with.
Right, and if you allow the deal to reach its full term before it expires, in that interim, your negotiating partners across the table, the Iranians, are actually strengthening themselves. Now, they may not, I don't know, they may not be producing, or they might not be continuing to in their nuclear weapons development program. They may, in fact, have been keeping to their commitments to put it on hold. But they were continuing with the ballistic missile program and all other weapons programs, so they would have been incomparably stronger from a military point of view when it came down to sitting down and renegotiating the expiring deal, A, and B, from an economic perspective, they would have been much, much stronger as well. So really what you're doing is you're saying, we're going to have this deal today. In 10 years or 15 years or whatever it is, it's going to expire, and we're going to renegotiate. And in that interim period, we're going to do everything we can to strengthen your negotiating position.
Yeah,
it's absurd.
Of course it is. But again, this is going to be one of the great stains that history afflicts on Obama. I mean, I know it's easy to blame the last guy. And, we certainly make a lot of hay out of when governments do that. But in this case, it actually is correct, because who was the captain of the ship when this deal was put together? Who negotiated it? It was Obama and a lot of socialist leaders out of the European Union who they just didn't want this on their plate, so they booted it down the road. And when I look at this, I'm thinking along the same lines you are. Trump said, we're not going to boot this down the road. We're going to deal with it. That's his mindset. Whether you like it or not, he's a deal maker. He wants to get things done. He doesn't want to sit around and watch things fester. And I think that's what's really important. And I also think, moving on to North Korea, you've got the same thing going on here. Now, North Korea today or yesterday said have threatened to pull out of the deal. Well, maybe they will, maybe they won't. And up until then, they were doing a really good job of trying to convince the world that they were going to end their nuclear weapons program. Now, I don't believe the little rocket man any further than I can throw him, and I'm not all that strong. So with that said, I'm not sure how genuine all these smiley faces were, the meeting with the South Korean President Moon, I think his name is, and setting up this meeting with with Trump. That might have been nothing more than window dressing to get the sanctions lifted that are afflicting that country. So I don't know how serious to take this latest threat, but if they think that they can intimidate the U.S. president into making a dumb move or, backing down, they've picked the wrong guy. Now, whether you like that or not, I think he's got too much political capital wrapped up in this to be able to back down, even if he wanted to.
We're going to have to see what's going to happen. But I will say this. What Donald Trump is doing, whether you agree with him or not, is he's laying the stage for negotiating from strength. So if the Chinese are going to sit down with him, or the North Koreans are going to sit down with him, or the Iranians or the Palestinians or anyone else, they have to know that they're not going to be able to push him around. And wielding that kind of power can be a little bit intimidating. It can be a little bit uncomfortable for some people. And I suspect that some of that is at play in the American psyche as well, especially on the left. But on balance, it's really too early to tell whether or not this is going to be a good thing.
Right.
It really is. And in fairness, okay,
yeah,
I like what he's doing. I think he's on the right road. As I said earlier on, I wish that he didn't have all of this extraneous sort of baggage that he's carrying along with him, okay? The tweets, all of the stuff, okay? But I like what he's doing in substance on the international scene. I think it's the right thing for the Americans to do. Here in Canada, we're in the process right now of renegotiating
NAFTA,
the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. Look, the Americans are going to try to drive a hard bargain. and good for them for doing it. And we should be doing the same thing. And that's just the way that the real world works.
Yeah, it's unfortunate we don't have a leader who understands that. He has this fairy tale image of what he wants the world to be, and he's trying to create the world in his image or in the way that he wants it to be, and nobody's even really clear what that means. What exactly is he trying to do here? So when you have a team like that without real clear leadership, as a matter of fact, I stayed at an Airbnb here recently, and the lady who was hosting me, she works for external affairs on the U.S. file. And she said, for years it was kind of dull. There was nothing exciting going on. And it was just, filling out forms and making sure everybody was on the same page, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't want to get into politics too deeply with her because, that's not why I was there. And she implied that Trump was the problem. And maybe she's right because of his hardline attitude. But what I didn't bother to mention is that what you're telling me then is under Harper, when he was in control, things went relatively smoothly because there was a healthy relationship, as much as I didn't like Obama, between the U.S. government and the Canadian government.
Yeah.
And that made it smoother.
But, Nick, what kind of wusses do we have at Foreign Affairs where they're going, it's so hard and it's all Trump's fault? And I'm thinking, well, he's the president of the United States. His job is not to look after the interests of Canada. That's just the reality. So he's making life tough on you. Boo-hoo. Yeah. Isn't that's his job? He's not going out of his way to make things tough on you. He's just looking out for the interests of the people who elected him and pay his salary. Well, actually, they don't pay his salary because he's not taking a salary.
Yeah, he gets
which is another thing that I don't think he's gotten any credit for.
Of course not. Well, he doesn't need the money, right?
Well, he doesn't need the money, but still, it's a nice gesture,
It'd be interesting to find out if Morneau, our own finance minister, draws a salary.
Oh, they all do. I don't know of a single politician in Canada that has the wherewithal not to take a salary for sitting in the House of Commons who's not taking their salary. I just don't know it.
You know what? You're probably right. And let's face it, MPs, their salaries end up to a tiny drop in the bucket compared to the budget of the country. That's it. So even if they all worked for free, it wouldn't make any difference on the financial scale anyway. Joseph, it's the top of the hour. I think we need to take a break. I know I got to visit the little boys' room. So when we come back, the number to join us is 844-415-2115. We'll be right back after this with more. All right, welcome back to the Combat Zone, folks. The number is 844-415-2115. Don't be afraid to give us a call. We don't bite very hard, and we both had most of our shots. So by all means, join us.
That was pretty nice music.
Yeah, it was. I kind of liked it.
Kind of majestic.
Rob is asking a question on Facebook. He says, where is the show site tonight? Combat Zone is playing music. Yeah, it is, Rob, because we just are going through a break. If you listen now, we'll be back. We're back from the break, and you'll hear the regularly scheduled programming. All right, so that takes care of that one. And again, don't be afraid to use Facebook Messenger. If you're on my friends list, send me a note. If you've got any questions that we can help you with or you want to weigh in on things, you can do that way too. And the combatzone.ca is where the site is streamed live. And please don't forget to click the Listen Live button.
Yeah, we have to, everybody's got to have the carefully laid out instructions. That's the kind of society we live in now, Nick. I just want to also remind people that if they're on the combatzone.ca and they're listening live using the player there, don't forget that you can send your comments. There's a little icon in that player, a little a bubble, the old cartoon type bubble. If you click on that, you should be able to take you to a page where you can send in, you can chat live with us from there. Okay.
Okay.
We should talk a little bit about some philosophical issues.
All right.
I think people start to get a little tired of the taxes and the politics and the government and all of that stuff. And we could go on and on and on for hours with that kind of stuff, Nick, because we have a whole list of grievances. And if we don't have them, we've been hearing about them from other people, and I'm happy to air those things out. But I think it's worthwhile spending a little bit of time talking about some principles and some ideas as well. And I think
Sure.
that that's a value added for our audience.
Well, it certainly helps them understand who we are and where we're coming from.
So, socialism.
Yes.
Socialism, why we were just talking, Nick and I were just talking.
Let me pose the question.
Okay, so you go ahead.
What is it about socialism that so many people find attractive? Why are we seeing, and there's probably 1,000 answers to this question, but I'm looking for a few that really kind of sum all the other ones up. Because socialism, in my mind, is a very close kissing cousin to communism. And we all know how well that works. Just look at the history of the last century. And yet people either they don't know their history, they don't care, they don't think it'll happen here, whatever that in quotations is. So I'm just curious if you had any thoughts about why people find this so attractive.
A couple of things. I think the first reason is because socialism holds out what I consider to be the myth that it's the right way or the best political system for caring for people. There's a lot of welfare in a socialist system, and there's a lot of planning, and around that planning, central planning, is the notion that if you allow people to do it themselves, A, they'll either fall down, or B, equally bad, if not worse, some people are going to end up succeeding more than others.
Yeah.
They're going to become wealthier than others. And is that fair? And then there's a fundamental distrust of people at the heart of the socialist agenda, of the progressive agenda. The notion that people cannot be trusted to do good things. And it's funny because, traditionally it's conservatives who have held the lower opinion of people, which is why we don't believe in the utopian project.
Right.
We believe that, people are flawed, and because people are flawed, you don't want to give people too much power over other people. I mean, that's, I think, a fundamental tenet of conservatism. So we believe that people are flawed, and we understand that, and we accept it, and that's why we believe in limited power. Socialists or progressives, on the other hand, kind of believe the same thing, but they believe that some people are more moral than other people, and that may be true. And if only we give those people with the correct answers the power, they'll be able to solve all of the world's problems. So it's much more utopian. And that argument appeals to people, Nick. It appeals to certain people who look around and go, there's poverty. We have to do something about poverty, okay? And so what are you going to do? Well, the government's going to do something about it. Now, historically, it was never this way, but we're now in a society where we've had 3, 4, 5 generations where looking out for people has been the responsibility of the state. And I think that today, I just don't think that younger people especially really appreciate how bad a job the state does looking out for people, and they don't really appreciate the kind-heartedness, the goodness of people out there who are prepared to open their homes, open their wallets, and provide assistance to those people who they feel deserve assistance, without the government interfering.
Oh, okay, and maybe it's just our particular age demographic, you and I, that we remember a time when the government didn't carry you cradle to grave. Now, look, you and I both grew up in the same era in the 60s and 70s because we're roughly the same age. And yes, there were social programs. Yes, there were, welfare. Yes, there was what we called it unemployment insurance in those days. Those things were all there. But the onus was on the individual more so to look after themselves than it is today. When I look at socialism, the question always comes back, and I can hear Margaret Thatcher saying this in the back of my head. The problem with socialism is sooner or later you run out of other people's money. Because I'm a very logical, common sense kind of guy. And when you look at these programs we have now, if you're born today, how will you ever learn to do what Jordan Peterson says, go make your own room, clean up your room? Because there's nobody out there making you do it. It's all fuzzy, feel good, this nebulous cloud of, it's all going to be wonderful. And you get people running off the rails all over the place because they don't understand that life has consequences. There are boundaries. There are things you cannot exceed. That's what having an ordered society is.
Right.
So when I look at the young kids today and I listen to them talk, it's like, do you have any idea what's going to happen out in the world with your master's degree in flower arranging? You're going to end up at Tim Hortons or driving a cab, because as much as the state and people in general pushed people through universities and colleges to get a degree of some kind, it's that piece of paper that's supposed to lead to, unlimited wealth and opportunity, and they fail, not because there's no value in those papers, but because the papers they got aren't in demand. And when they get out there, they go, the system failed me. No. Well, yes, it did, because it never taught you to stand on your own 2 feet. It can't replace your parents. And too many times people try that. I got to share with you a couple comments here off Facebook. Doug says, good to have you back. That music, not so much. Excuse me. Then right away, Marin says, I love the music. I think my neighbors might have heard me singing along. Marin, sing your heart out, sweetheart. It doesn't matter if anybody's listening.
Well, guys, the alternative for tonight was you get music when you get up to get a glass of water, a cup of coffee, or a cup of tea, and maybe take a bathroom break and stretch your legs, and or you get to listen to Nick and I droning on for all that time too. And guys, you got to give us a break. The fact is that even talking heads like us have to, catch our breath and wet our whistle a little bit. And by that, I mean water, nothing harder than that. Nick did not bring the apple cider tonight.
No, I didn't. I probably should have. 1 can of apple cider isn't going to hurt.
You're coughing a lot tonight, Nick.
Yeah.
It's your allergies a little bit there.
Yeah, probably. It's irritating. I know people don't like it. I don't like it either, believe me, because I got to live with it. I can't get away from it.
Look, let's get back into this thing about socialism and some of the ideas or some of the observations that you've made. Let me tell you what I think. I think that another fundamental difference that touches on the observations that you've made between socialists or leftists or progressives and conservatives is that there's a fundamental difference of opinion, a different understanding between us of what it means to be free, of what liberty really is.
Yeah.
And for conservatives, we believe in ordered liberty. And I'll get into what I think that means in a minute. But for liberals, for progressives, the idea of freedom is they believe that the opposite of freedom is tyranny.
Tyranny, yeah.
And that therefore the fewer controls or restrictions or boundaries you have governing your life, the more free you are. That's sort of their paradigm, the way they look at it. For us, we don't think that way as conservatives. For us, the opposite of liberty is not tyranny. The opposite of liberty is anarchy.
Absolutely.
And so this is why we believe in ordered liberty. For us, the question is not how much control you have in your life. The question is the locus of control. Is that control and those rules and boundaries being imposed on you from the state, from the government, from outside? Or are you living your life with a certain amount of self-discipline? Are you imposing boundaries on yourself? Are you trying to live the good life for yourself, for your family, and for your community? And if you think about it, many of the things that we don't like the government telling us to do, we should be doing ourselves, like cleaning your room, like making your bed.
Right.
So to a very large degree, and I think this is one of the reasons why I think socialism is so appealing to so many people, is because it holds out this notion that you can live without boundaries and somebody's going to be there to shield you from the consequences of living without boundaries.
Yeah, it's called the bubble wrap mentality.
So what ends up happening is we design these programs and not so much to help people, but to help them escape from reality. So that's really, when you boil it right down, is the left-wing vision of liberty, of freedom, is not freedom from anarchy, and it's really, in a sense, not even freedom from tyranny. It's freedom from reality. And so you get to do whatever you want to do because we don't have any laws. But not only that, because I'm happy not having so many laws as long as people are behaving without those laws.
Well, it's funny. Let me just jump in on that, because my son and I were having this conversation. Both of us really enjoy the economist Milton Friedman.
Right.
Who's, if you know anything about economist, Milton Friedman is very well respected. But he's very much a libertarian.
Correct.
And he said to me, I suppose you probably, because I said, look, I listen to a lot of what Milton Friedman has to say. It all makes, what I listen to makes a lot of sense. He said, well, you probably don't like his attitude about drug use then, and let's just legalize it all. And I said, you know what? If we had a society that was far more well-grounded in principles and the fundamental understanding of what life's about and how you achieve things in life, I'm not so sure I'd have a problem with that. But because our society is so dysfunctional, is so out of whack, that if you were to legalize all drugs like heroin and cocaine and all this other stuff, not only would you kill a victimology industry designed around keeping, and I know a lot of people out there, and I'm painting with a really broad brush here, because there's a lot of really caring people out there trying to do their best in a broken system. But in general, a lot of people need this situation to continue, drug addiction, counseling and trying to get them off the streets and homelessness. They count on that for the six-figured income. And if you end it, then they're out of a job and they don't like that.
Right. Well,
that's how broken we are.
Yeah, I'm personally not that cynical. I think that people really do care. But the problem is that we're spending all of our time and all of our resources these days really treating the symptom rather than the sickness.
Absolutely.
And so we say to people, behave essentially any way you want to. I mean, what's the great social crime that you could commit these days is to be judgmental. Oh, my goodness. Don't judge a person. Well, maybe we should have a little bit of judgmentalism. Maybe we should be able to say, look, it's a free country. You can do what you want. But that doesn't mean that what you want to do is the right thing to do. Well, somebody said something very important, that profound, that I always stuck with me. And it wasn't directed to me, I just happened to witness it. As a friend of mine, was expressing his opinion. I don't even remember what it was about, to his father, and his father, was rather disdainful towards his son and the opinions that he was expressing. And his son said, I have the right to an opinion. You should respect my opinion. And his father said to him, he said, no. He said, I respect your right to have an opinion. That doesn't mean I have to respect your opinion.
That's right.
I just respect your right to have it.
There's a huge ocean of difference between those two things.
Absolutely. And
But I got a comment here from Facebook I want to share with you. Rob says, Joseph nailed it. Freedom from reality is a cop-out. It takes away all the teachings of self-control, fulfillment, and care that all of us old guys were taught.
Yeah, and if you go back, Rob, to the founding of the United States,
right?
Because this is really the best example in history of the creation of a country, of a political structure that was thought out, that was designed from the ground up.
It just didn't happen.
It didn't just happen, okay? They thought about these things. And when they were coming up with checks and balances and trying to figure out what the right role of government is and how deeply involved it should be, and that, I don't remember which of the American founding fathers said it, but there was a general belief and understanding of the importance of religion to a free society. Now, when I say that, I'm not talking about the theological ritual aspects of religion, although I think those are important, okay?
Right.
But I'm talking about the underlying fundamental teachings of religions, of Christianity predominantly. Because the United States was a Christian country, as was Canada, and I say that I think that's a great thing myself, and I'm speaking as a Jew.
Right.
The religion, the church, broadly speaking, was the institution that was responsible for inculcating in people this sense of personal responsibility, the boundaries, the rules. And when people ruled over themselves, and this, for me, this is what self-rule actually means. Self-rule and governing ourselves, okay, self-government doesn't mean...
It's about self-control.
That's right. It's about self-control.
Right.
And if you're not going to control yourself, and if you can't control yourself, here's the real ringer, okay? The real crux of the matter is, if you can't control yourself, are you really free? If you're a slave to your passions, and this is very Burkean what I'm saying now, okay? If you're a slave to your passions, if you can't control your sexual behavior, if you can't control whether you're going to overeat or not, I'm saying that as a chronic overeater. So, I'm perfectly happy looking at myself in the mirror and saying, you have to be critical as well. Self-critical. If you can't control whether or not you're going to take drugs or whether or not you're going to, comes right down to the fundamental things you mentioned earlier, making your bed, tidying your own room.
That's right.
If you're not going to do any of those things, okay, because you don't feel like it, then you're nothing more than a billiard ball being bounced around in life. You're a slave to your passions. You're a slave to all of the fads and movements and vicissitudes of life. Are you free? Are you really free? And in an ironic sort of paradoxical way, as conservatives, we really do believe, and I think that there's a lot of sense to this, that the only way you can be free is if you set those boundaries internally, and then you make decisions based on what the right decision is rather than what I feel like or what's easy and what's hard.
Well, people often confuse feelings with facts. They think that just because I feel this way, let's take the binary driver's license that the government, we were going to talk about.
Birth certificate.
Birth certificate, that's it. You can pick
non-binary.
Non-binary, that's right.
Birth certificate.
Exactly,
right,
non-binary.
Right.
People are allowed to choose no gender at all. Look, I'm going to get in trouble for this someday, and I frankly don't care. There's only two genders. You were born with it. You can't change it because it's the analogy I like to use is if the house is infested with termites, shingling the roof and painting the front door aren't going to fix the problem. It's the same thing with this idea where people think that just because I feel like a girl today or I feel like a boy today, that's what I am. Tomorrow I might feel like a cat. The day after I might feel like a goat. Now, I feel like a horse's back end a lot of times, but I don't, I'm just being a little facetious. But the point is that you cannot rewrite the laws of nature to suit your understanding of reality. It's like if you look at a tree and the leaves are green, and you have another person who isn't colorblind standing beside you, and he says the leaves are purple, something's wrong. Okay? Because they're not purple. If you got 100 people walk by, they all say that's green, and he says, no, it's purple, he's the one that's wrong. But society said, well, I guess in that case, you identify that as purple. No, there's this you can't live that way. You end up like, you should end up in a straitjacket if you don't. Anyway, you get my point. You get what I'm driving at.
I get what you're driving at. And I think that this goes back again. You see, where you're wrong, Nick, is you're wrong when you say you can't live that way.
Well, okay, fair enough.
You can live that way, but the reason you can live that way is because we have now this whole apparatus of state that supports you in living that way.
Okay, that's a good point. And you're quite right. That's the tragedy. Maybe that's the better way to look at it. That's the tragedy, is the fact that even though you are you ever watched Mythbusters? I
haven't, but I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's a very good show. They're done now. But one of the lines that one of the co-hosts had was, "I reject your reality and I substitute my own." Okay, and that's going on en masse across our country, across our culture and our society, because people are rejecting reality because they don't like it. They want to have, they want people to put their own personal feelings aside so they don't get offended by what you're thinking. Jordan Peterson had a great line in that interview on BBC. She said, what right do you have not to put down somebody who's transgender? Why is that fair? And Jordan says, well, first of all, in order to think, you have to risk being offensive. Otherwise, what's the point? And he went on to explain that point out at great length. But that's really the nub of it. Feelings now matter more than reality does. And that, I think, is a huge problem. And I'm other than blowing up the whole education system from kindergarten all the way through to post-graduation, post-secondary, that's the word I'm looking for, and just try to reinstill those values. I don't know how, it's going to be a long road to hoe to turn that around.
It sure is. And like Ben Shapiro says, facts don't have feelings.
Amen to that. I want to share with you, just before we go to break, there's one more comment from Facebook I want to share with you. I think people are naturally self-serving and socialism provides them something for free. I know it's very appealing to be told that I'm going to get this or that. I'm old enough to realize how deadly socialism is.
Yeah, absolutely. But set aside the deadly thing. I think that the really, just before we go to break, let me just make this point. I think the really, really fundamental danger of socialism isn't that it leads to tyranny and dictatorship. That's a very real danger for sure. But the real danger in socialism is that it instills in people the belief that they can't do it. They can't take care of themselves.
They don't want to take any risks.
And, we grew up, when we talk about universal health care, we've had health care in this country for since you and I were born, Nick. But and I'm 55 years old, I remember even as an adult still having to pay for my insurance premiums for universal health care. So even the idea that you don't pay insurance premiums in this country for your health care, or at least in this province, is a relatively new idea. We used to pay, it was a publicly run insurance program, OHIP was, Ontario Health Insurance Plan. Uh-huh. It was publicly run, but it was an insurance program. And you paid you as an individual or as a family. There were two fees, two separate amounts, and you paid that. Every 3 months you had to pay your fee, and you'd send the check in. And if you didn't pay that fee, they suspended your coverage, just like any other insurance company, until you paid the fee. And here's the other thing that used to happen. Our doctor in where I grew up was a country doctor, still made house calls. It was really the most amazing thing. And he never charged OHIP for anything. What he would do is he would charge us. We would pay the doctor's bill, and we would submit that bill, the receipt, along with proof of payment, to the department, to the insurance company, OHIP, and they would reimburse us whatever the amount was. Right. And he always charged us a little bit more than what OHIP would reimburse us. And then the government stepped in and said, "Well, no, we're not allowed. You can't do that anymore." It's the point I'm making here, Nick, is that this is just one small example of how we actually did do these things, and society was still good, and people weren't dying in the streets, and people weren't going without health care, etc.
Yeah, that's the one thing about socialists. Whenever you threaten a sacred cow, it's always, well, what do you want? Do you want bodies in the streets? Do you want police? in other words, it's always the most draconian thing that's going to happen if you threaten one of their sacred cows.
Okay, we're going to have to go for a break, Nick. It's our last break for the evening. We're going to head into the home stretch. But before we go, 844-415-2115 is our toll-free number. Or you can send us a message on Facebook, or you can send us a message using the app at thecombatzone.ca. We're still looking for the answer to our question. What is the coldest capital on average in the world? Ottawa's the second coldest. What is the coldest capital in the world? So take a few minutes in the break. Rob, you're going to have to listen to a little bit more music. I'm sorry.
Yeah. All right. You guys stay right there, and we'll be right back with more. All right. Welcome back to the Combat Zone. I'm trying to say Combat Zone show, folks.
Jaune is French for yellow, so we're definitely not yellow on this show.
No. Good God, no. There's a lot of things we are, but jaune isn't one of them. No, welcome back to the Combat Zone.
Yeah, wake up, guys.
Yeah.
Wake up. That music probably put you to sleep.
By the way, we will have something a little spicier, a little more energetic at the top of the hour to end the show. And we'll try, you know what I used to do this when I was on terrestrial radio, was put a bunch of links up to the music I was going to use during the show as in and out music. Now, we don't have as many in and outs on this particular format, although that'll change as sponsorship comes along. And if you are a business or you have an organization that would like to advertise and support the show, by all means, send us a note. You can send it to Joseph at josephben-ami.ca or com. So that's Joseph at josephben-ami.com. He's the money man. I'm just a talking head. Anyway, so there's that. The number is 844-415-2115. You can join us at that number, and there's plenty of conversation straight ahead.
Okay, come on. Before we go on, guys. Seriously, now, what is the coldest capital in the world? I'll let you 3 guesses, Nick. Let's close the question off so we don't forget it at the end of the show.
I would have said Moscow.
It's not Moscow. Great guess, though. I mean, that
Helsinki?
seems to be the obvious guess would be Moscow, but it's not Moscow. No.
Is it Helsinki?
No, Helsinki actually is right on the Baltic, which makes it surprisingly warm and temperate in the wintertime.
Oh.
I've been to Helsinki in the wintertime. And then you go up north a little bit further into Scandinavia, to the peninsula, and it's not especially cold, but there's a lot of snow, and it's dark. It's dark in the wintertime.
Oh, yeah,
I don't know how people can live there. You got
to be raised in it to be able to deal with it. I don't think you can just transplant yourself there.
I don't know.
The only other thought I might have is the capital of Sweden, which escapes me at the moment.
The coldest capital city in the world is Ulaanbaatar, which is the capital city of Mongolia.
It's altitude. I'm thinking it's latitude. It's not latitude. It's altitude in this case.
Yeah, and of course, there's no large body of water around Ulaanbaatar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, because I always thought it was Moscow first, Ottawa second.
Yeah, no, not Moscow.
Or the other way around. I always thought it was Ottawa, then Moscow.
Yeah, so there you go.
All right, you people now we know the answer to that.
All you people in Ottawa, you can commiserate now. There ought to be a government program for that, by the way. Something.
Well, if they cut their carbon emissions, I'm sure they could bring the temperature back down to more reasonable.
Don't get me started on that topic.
That's a topic we'll revisit more than once.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Speaking of topics,
the climate catastrophists.
Yes, I love that phrase. And it's funny how many of them you run into on Facebook. I can't tell. There's one guy, and I won't name him, but he swears to God that the world is going to come crashing down because I have 8 children. He might be right, but it won't be because of climate change. I'm putting more voters in. I'm putting up more voters out than he is. So, and as far as I know, the kids that are old enough, there's about 4 kids now that can vote. They're all going to vote blue. And the other 4, I'm working on.
One step at a time, Nick. Yeah. One step at a time.
All right.
One child at a time. And of course, we get to work on grandchildren now too, right? So,
well, I got 2 of those. And they are what we call ever-ready bunny battery bunnies.
I have to tell you that most of my grandchildren, are going to grow up to be very right-wing.
Yeah, I have the same feeling in our household. But we have, I'll just tell you, I This is the version. This is the audio version, pulling out your wallet and showing your kids' pictures or your grandkids' pictures. My little Haley, how old is she? 4? 4. I don't think she's 5 yet.
You don't know it. You don't know how old your
I have trouble remembering how old I am.
How many grandchildren do you have, Nick?
2.
And you don't remember how old your 2 grandchildren
And for
are.
God's sake, don't ask me what their birthday is.
Wait a minute. Nick, you have 8 kids, and you are, I think you're a couple of months older than me. So what, you're 55, coming soon to 56, right?
I'm 56.
You're 56 now, so you're a year older than me. How come you have so few grandchildren? I don't understand.
I have been asking myself that, first of all, it took my oldest daughter 10 years to find her husband. Now, Darren's a great guy. She really landed a gem in Darren. I really respect him. He's a good guy. Loves his family, works hard. I mean, just everything you want in a son-in-law. He even takes me fishing once in a while. So, what more can you ask?
Does he take you beaver shooting, though?
That's the other way around. Actually, he would. His family used to run a place called Turner's Camp out in Bon Shire, along the Bon Shire River. They only just divested themselves of it this year, but they had hunting rights for thousands of acres around Algonquin Park, and that's what they did, was they brought people in and gave them a hunt or took them fishing, and so he's very much into the outdoors. But anyway, his daughter Haley, I'm going to say, is 4, and about a year ago, you've been to my place. When you walk out of the kitchen, just before you hit the end of the living room on the outside, you turn and there's a little flat rock there. And if somebody stands on it, you can't quite see them from the kitchen. So my daughter is very conscientious, and when she couldn't see her daughter, she said, "Haley, where are you?" And Haley said, "I'm out here." She said, "Well, Mommy wants you to come in the house so I can see you, or at least come in the yard where I can see you because I want you to be safe." She says, "No, I'm okay." I said, No, you need to come. I'm not asking. You need to come around. No, I'm okay. So she went out to get her. She said, Haley, what are you doing? She said, "Mom, I'm just standing here watching the world go by." 4 years old. Anyway, so they provide a lot of energy. So it took her 10 years to find a husband. My next boy down, Peter, is 30. He's only just now comfortable with where he is in life that he's starting to look for female companionship. Then I have a 23-year-old who is open to the idea but is really fussy. And the only one I have with a girlfriend of the 3 boys is my youngest son, Mark, at home. He's 17. And he's got himself a very nice little girlfriend, so we'll see what comes of that. But holy mackerel, I got a wedding coming up in not this weekend, but next weekend. One of my daughters is getting married, so there'll be more grandkids coming. It's just they're all from the girl side. I need my boys to have sons. I want to carry on the name.
Okay.
See what happens if you ask me about that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some witty response.
There's nothing witty. You just feel sorry for me.
Yeah, I don't feel sorry for you, really,
No,
Nick.
I didn't think so.
But family's great. It's really, I'm always astonished by people who go, "Oh, I don't want to have children," and that. And I go, "Really? You really don't appreciate." First of all, until you have children and you're raising them, you don't appreciate how much work it is.
Amen to that.
It's a lot of work, but it's like doing a really, really hard day's labor, and at the end of the day, you look at what you've done and you go, "Man, that was hard." But the sense of satisfaction, seeing the results, seeing your family building and that, and it's really something else. So you want my recommendation? This is not to you, Nick. You're already over the hill. But get married young, stay married, have lots of children. And, there's going to be ups and downs and rough spots in life, and it'll be a struggle for some people. But in the end, the rewards really are quite spectacular. If you stick it out, if you stick together, and you do it in a meaningful way. Don't just let your kids go off and be raised by the wolves, as they say.
Well, I think one of the best lines I ever heard Jordan Peterson utter was, "Make sure your kids don't do anything to make you not like them."
Yeah, that's good advice. It's a good way of putting it, for sure. Yeah,
he's been hugely influential all over the world, and it's remarkable, and it's timely too. But as far as families are concerned, I laugh at people who think, like, I've been called a breeder, I've been called all kinds of, greedy because I'm using up too much of the world's resources. And I'm thinking, you have no idea what you're talking about. Because first of all, and I say this kind of lightheartedly, if you've got, let's say, 3 or 4 kids, the workload starts to drop off because as the first 2 get old enough, now what you can do is start parceling out the work to them. So the more kids you have, the less work it actually is on you. There's more work to do, but more hands to share it. So when I come home and it's wintertime, I can look at one of them and say, you start the dishes. This is after supper. You do this, you do that. You go fill the wood boxes and make sure there's enough to get us through the night. I'll be in the living room. Bring me a beer.
Yeah, but you know what?
Which never works.
You know what the real absolute showstopper response for anybody who says to you that you're taking up the resources, that you're greedy, or any of those things, what you do is you look them in the eye and say, "Yeah, but look at all the taxpayers I'm contributing."
Yeah.
And you know, if they're socialists or progressives, they should appreciate that.
Well, you got to remember that these people don't think linearly. They're nebulous in their thinking, and they don't often connect the dots like that. At least the ones I've run into.
Was that too harsh, by the way? Am I too harsh on the left? I
don't think we're harsh enough.
You don't think so?
No, I think too many people are afraid of the left. Like, if you dive back into the world of politics, how many times have you seen a politician say something that actually made sense and then backpedal? Rob Ford and the Green Belt, or Doug Ford and the Green Belt, as an example. That's a brilliant idea. The idea of opening up some of the green belt for development for housing to put more units in the market to help bring the price of housing down. Because he understands basic economics.
Right.
Well, oh my God, the left went nuts. And the next day went, oh, no, people have spoken, I'm back. No, don't back up. Explain why it's a good idea.
Well, this is, you're touching on a really good point. And in politics, it's really important to defend your ideas. And it's so discouraging. Nick, you and I have talked about this before often. It's so discouraging, to get into the trenches and you're ready to do battle, ideologically speaking. You're ready to argue out and debate vigorously and to present your side of the argument. And then your leaders, the officers in the trenches, abandon you the first time somebody says boo. Somebody fires a shot at you guys and they turn tail and run. You know what I call them? There's this thing in Canada, for those of you who are not Canadian, that we have a term in Canada called red Tories.
Yes.
And red Tories are conservatives in name only. There was my cough. Boy, that's the first time I coughed all night.
I promise tuberculosis is not contagious.
No. Conservatives in name only. And where was I going with this? And we call them red Tories. So and they're really liberals who are playing on the conservative team, but ideologically, philosophically, they're on the left of the political spectrum. So this is a term that we've had traditionally, that we've used quite extensively in this country to describe, soft conservatives. I think that that's wrong. I don't think that the difference is between red Tories and blue Tories. I think it's between true conservatives and what I call white flag conservatives. The ones who can't wait to run up the white flag the minute they run into any kind of opposition to the policies that they say they believe in, the principles that they said they believed in when they were seeking your support as a voter or as a donor, and they run away from these policies the minute they have to defend them, really. Well, the consequence, just to finish the thought, Nick, sorry to interrupt you, but the result of that is that the average person in the street never really gets to hear a vigorous defense of the conservative side of the argument. And there are sound arguments to make, and they just don't make them.
No, you and I are on exactly the same page on that. And whether people like this or not, whether you like the man or not, one of the things that got Trump elected was the fact that he did not bow to all the name-calling and mudslinging of the press. As a matter of fact, he fought back tooth and nail. He didn't let them. I remember him telling it was CNN reporter or somebody at an early press conference. He said, "No, you're the problem. You shut up and sit down." And the country went crazy. The United States went nuts because finally somebody stood up and told these people what millions of people have been thinking. And this is the part in Canadian politics I can't seem to get any traction with. Don't be afraid of the left. You know they're going to dig up stuff from 20 years ago. Own it. If they accuse you of it, admit it, and then say, now let's get back to our regularly scheduled programming, and we'll talk about what's important. Because what I said when I was 19 is not relevant today. I was 19. If we dug in your background, how many of you would come up with, how many comments like that could we find on you?
Well, I love the idea of if you have skeletons in your closet and you want to run for public office, the first thing you do is you hold your skeletons in the closet press conference.
There you go.
And you don't wait for any of this stuff to be dug out. You go right out there and you throw it at people right up front. And you say, this is what I did when I was younger. This is what I did 3 years ago. This is what I said. I stand by it, or I was stupid then. Just lay it all out there so that people know. And then there's no more skeleton in the closet to be exposed in the middle of a political campaign. I have to tell you that very few people do that, but it's a normal legal strategy. If you're a lawyer in trial and you have a witness on the witness stand, and you know that there's going to be something in their past that's going to impugn their testimony, you're far better out bringing it out yourself rather than waiting for them to bring it out, for the opposing side to bring it out during cross-examination. Have your witness say, yeah, I did this, I did that. It just looks so much better, and it completely disarms the other side.
Absolutely.
It's used normally in legal circles. It's virtually never used in political circles, and I just don't understand why that's the case.
Well, let me give you a personal, real example of exactly that. When I used to be a truck driver driving over the road, I worked for a company out of one of the companies I worked for. I was an owner-operator, owned my own rig, and was driving for a company called Clark and Snively out of Leamington, who is now, they folded up their tent a number of years ago. The company's not around anymore. But the dispatcher's name was a guy called Roger. And he had a bit of a temper, and he sent me over for a delivery for 7 a.m., to a little town called Essex, where they had this bakery, world-famous bakery, or at least famous in Ontario. They did a lot of bread for a lot of grocery stores. And I pulled in there when the 7 o'clock news was on. I had to wait for another guy to pull out of the pit because there's only one loading dock. I backed in, they unloaded it, I got back, and Randy is going out of his mind. And he says, you shut down the plant. I said, what do you mean I shut down the plant? He said, your load was late. I said, well, first of all, no, it wasn't. I told him what happened. He says, that doesn't matter. They didn't have that stuff. They had to shut down the line. And I said, all right, Randy, my fault. I'm the captain of my own ship. If my stuff is late and I caused it, then fine. I'm guilty. And what that did was strip him of all of his thunder. He couldn't, what's he going to say now? And that's the part I can't get people to understand, is if you own the problem right up front, or even if it comes out of the blue, don't be afraid to stand up and say, yeah, we've all done stupid things. Why do you make an exception for me? I'm embarrassed about XYZ that happened 30 years ago, but I'm an adult now. I was a kid then. Own it. Jump on it. Own it. Take it away from them.
There was somebody, now this is just ringing a bell because it was in the NFL draft just a couple of weeks ago, where one of the quarterbacks that was drafted in the first round was supposed to go first or second pick, and the night before the draft they discovered that when he had been 13 years old, he had done some racist tweets, and that came out, and there was a big kerfuffle around it, and I think he handled it really well. He said, yeah, I did it. I did those tweets, and I was 13 years old, and I was stupid, and that's not the same person. I'm not the same person. But he didn't run away from it. He didn't try to spin it or anything like that. He just straight out, yeah, that was me. I did it. I said it. It was dumb, stupid. I was young, and what else am I supposed to say? And the controversy went away right away.
Well, that's the whole point of owning it, because once you've done that, then they have no more ammunition. You've taken it all on them. So to get this through the heads of people, because people are terrified of being labeled racists or misogynists or whatever, and my attitude is, if what they're charging you with is real, admit it, then bat it aside. Say, yeah, that was 30 years ago. Let's get back to this. And, I'm not denying it. I did it, as you pointed out, with this young man. He said, I was a kid. It was stupid. I don't believe those things anymore. Now let's get back to talking about what matters and throw it back at them. And that, I think, is a key. When people find out that you're human and you're not going to try to slippery eel your way out of the bucket, then they respect that, because they've done the same things. They know that nobody's perfect. We have to stop. Like the liberals today were calling for, I was listening to terrestrial radio, the dumping of another PC candidate, a doctor by the name of Fullerton. Excuse me, I can't remember her first name. But Mary or Marjorie or something like that. She's running in Mississippi Carlton. And they found a tweet from 2015. And she's Islamophobic, she's this, she's that. It was 2015, for crying out loud. Now they're wondering whether Doug Ford's going to kick her out.
Yeah, what was it she said? It wasn't so bad, I thought.
No, she said the main comment they went after was she was Islamophobic, because she said, would you want to send your child to a school to a teacher wearing a mask? Comfortable? Now, in 2015, there was a huge debate in Quebec about the whole secular move to secularism, getting rid of religious symbols. No crucifixes, no anything to demonstrate what your faith is. And this was the context of that conversation. So they took it completely out of context, because everybody was asking those questions at the time. But they found that, they dug it up, and now they're demanding she's be disposed of.
Yeah, and of course they're going to demand it because the PC campaign was so quick to dump Tanya Granick-Allen a few weeks ago, or a couple of weeks ago, so when that happens in politics, it's blood in the water, and the sharks start circling around, and it's only a matter of time before they start piling on, and you see that's what's happening right now.
Well, this is the kind of thing that I hope that Ford doesn't fall for this, because the liberals. Because when the interviewer was asking her about it, I said, "Don't you think this is just trying to score?" He said, "Don't you think you're just trying to score cheap political points here?" Oh, the doctor's first name is Marilee, by the way, Marilee Fullerton. So anyway, thanks, Rob, for that piece of information. What happens is, I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about?
You know what? Hold that for next week, because we're coming up on 2 hours now, Nick. We've got about a minute left on the show.
Okay.
And so probably it's a good idea now to just say to people, like, we're glad you joined us today. We apologize if we were a little rough today. First time that either Nick or I have done live broadcast for a little bit of time. And so it's good, as Nick said earlier on, to be back in the saddle again. Things are going to go a lot more smoothly, both technically and from a content point of view. But it's been really great, Nick, to do this with you tonight. And I just wanted to remind people that they can send us their feedback at comments at thecombatzone.ca. That's comments, plural, at thecombatzone.ca. What do you have to say, Nick?
I have to say that I have thoroughly enjoyed this. This is the kind of thing I just love doing. It makes me kind of pine for my, traditional radio days, but it sure is a salve to the soul to be able to discuss these issues. So I look forward to next week. I'm sure we'll have even more fun then.
Okay, next week, 9 p.m. Eastern Time in the Combat Zone. We'll catch you then.